Richard Hanson is a principal and founder of Mesa Development, which is a Chicago-based real estate firm that specializes in commercial, retail, and luxury residential development. And two of his projects that are perhaps better known in Chicago, the Heritage at Millennium Park and the Legacy at Millennium Park, which are two new luxury condo facilities in the city. And the conversation that you're having is really your function here at the conference is to kind of listen to 2 days of conversations among architects and engineers and planners and listen to the kinds of things that they're developing, the kinds of projects they're working on, and then sort of lend your commentary from what, an economic and a financial standpoint, correct?
Well, Tony said from a developer standpoint, but as I've paid attention for the last 2 days, it seems to me that most of my comments will center on the economic environment that exists today for development. And by way of background, I'm a CPA. My background is accounting, not development, not construction. So I tend to think about these things more in the economic point of view.
Well, John Portman yesterday, who's designed and developed a lot of hotels, said the reality hits you when you have to sign the back of the check down at the bank. So really that's what this is all about. And the panel discussion that you're participating in is the future of urban tall in a world of uncertain economics. And we have certainly come across some uncertain economics here in Chicago over the last 10 years. And over the last couple of years, we've got some projects on hold here. What's the economy like right now, and what are you thinking as you're hearing all of these wonderful ideas for urban planning and high rises, and what is the reality that you're seeing?
Well, honestly, I don't think a new building is going to be built in Chicago for quite a while. And there's a lot of doom and gloom going about in prior recessions or whatever this thing we're in right now. People always talk about oversupply, and it always seems to be consumed much quicker. But the reality is, right now, almost everything is being sold for way below replacement cost. And until we get back to replacement cost as a revenue generator, at least getting all your money back, there won't be anything new built, and that's going to take quite a while.
Well, you're developing luxury condos, and there's quite a few luxury condos in Chicago already. What's the market like, and what's your experience been? This must be a great time to invest if you can.
No, not yet.
Really?
Yeah, I think that the problem still exists between what we call the bid and the ask. In other words, people who own the asset have a certain idea of what it might be worth, and people who are buying have obviously a different idea, and it's almost always less. And these two parties have not yet gotten together, and there have not been enough transactions in the marketplace where there is some place to look to say, okay, that's the market. That's fair market value, because you can't have fair market value unless there's a market, unless there's something going on. And right now there's nothing going on, so nobody's making the first move.
And when that happens, of course, is when all of the fun begins.
Exactly.
I suppose. But the federal government, the Federal Reserve, or the economists have said that the recession is over, and there's generally some kind of a lag time between the time that happens and the time that we actually start to feel it. Do you get the feeling that things have fundamentally changed in the economy to where when it comes back it's not going to be quite the same it was, or what's your view of what's eventually going to come about?
Well, my crystal ball isn't that good,
Right.
but I mean, there are fundamental changes. For instance, there'll never be never's never. You never use that word. Never use the word never. But factually speaking, there'll never be the leverage that we used to have. I mean, developers were capable a couple of years ago of getting 100% financing. You could go out and borrow. And you could borrow that at an incredibly low interest rate. LIBOR, I don't want to get too technical, but the base borrowing cost is under 1%, and then you add a spread of a couple hundred basis points. So we were borrowing money at 3.5%. That won't happen again. That won't happen again for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is, we hear all the time about how the federal government intends to promote new regulations with regard to capitalization of banks. that will require banks to significantly increase their capital base, to significantly de-lever, and equity costs a lot more than debt. And so the whole fundamental cost structure of borrowing money, of the money you get to build your buildings, is going to get a lot more expensive.
So the bottom line is it's going to be harder to get in
Much
if you're
harder.
if you're not already in.
Right. The amount of equity that you will need as a developer, the investors you will have to get, and an investor wants a 15, 20, 25% return on investment in these risk defined real estate investments, as opposed to 3%.
Well, nobody likes to be negative, but these are the numbers and these are the realities. And reality has hit us in Chicago in two ways. You've got the Chicago Spire, which has gone unbuilt, that they're still trying to get financing for, and they've got a foundation already laid, and everything is on hold right now. And then there's the Waterview Hotel, which was planned to be probably in the 1,000-foot range, that you say has been sitting empty and really unworked on for a year at about 36 floors, just concrete standing there. So that's the reality. And I'm just wondering, we need to talk about Chicago, not only Chicago though, but also the rest of the world. When you listen to all of what's been going on here in the last several days and all the projects that they're talking about and just some wonderful stuff out there, what are you thinking?
Well, what amazes me about what I've heard in 2 days is, this is kind of a different way to answer your question, is no one's talking about the user. We're talking about these beautiful buildings and the architecture and the space, but my reality is that the consumer, and I build condominiums, so somebody put 10% down on a condominium I built. They put that 10% down 2.5 years ago, when because these things take 3 years to build, and you need to be 50% pre-sold. So 50% of my buyers had in effect made their decision to buy in better times. So one reality is that what I'm doing today is reselling to the same people, but I'm reselling I've got 356 condominiums, 90% pre-sold. I'm reselling almost all of them to those buyers, because they have witnessed what you're talking about. They have witnessed the decline in value, all the discussion, and now they're saying to themselves, is my bargain still a good bargain? So that's residential. In the commercial field, we have massive unemployment, above 10%. So the average commercial user doesn't need the space they've got. And so there's an incredible, we know that vacancy rates might be 15%, but the real vacancy rate, if you took a look at inside the leased space and said, okay, XYZ company, they may have a 50,000 foot lease, but how much are they really using? And when's the next time they will take more space? Well, they're not going to take more space till they refill. I'm not going to build another building until I sell what I have. So all of these things also suggest that there's huge overhangs that will need to be dealt with before there'll be any new construction. Now, I was lucky. I started my building soon enough that I got it finished, and it's amazing that a buyer or a user loves to get into the property, and this resale is a lot easier to do when you're standing in their unit and they see their views and all the amenities. What happened to something like the Spire or like Shangri-La is they didn't get built, and so their banks got nervous or whatever occurred. I'm not inside those deals, but something occurred which caused them to stop. Well, for them to start is twice as hard because they not only have to resell all their customers, they got to resell the banks. They've got to convince some bank somewhere that it's worth starting that one up again, and that's a double hurdle. I mean, I think it's going to be very difficult.
Well, in history, in Chicago anyway, is replete with examples of buildings that have not gone ahead because of something that has happened. And when you said that, the first thing I thought about was Caesar Pelle's Miglin-Beitler Tower, which they had announced it. They had the parcel of land. They said the world's tallest building is coming to Chicago, a 2,000-footer. And then the Persian Gulf War, the first one in '91 happened, and I don't know if it disappeared overnight, but the banks ran. And there have been at least 5 2,000-foot tall proposals in Chicago that you follow the market, you must be aware of, that went nowhere because the banks got scared or something happened on the world scene. Is it more volatile now? Are people more skittish now? Have the rules changed since '91 where if something happens on the world scene, people are a little bit more reactive, or has that remained pretty constant?
Both.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I think, and I say both because I think we have a much more aware consumer right now, whether it be the internet, much more focus on jobs, you know, values. When the market loses $1 trillion in value or two, people start to pay attention. You know, that's real money. People start to pay. So you have a much more involved consumer group, and the world's getting smaller and smaller. So, you know, things that used to happen thousands of miles away that you never thought about or worried about now are in your backyard. And so I think both have occurred, and I think it's just getting harder and harder to do. You know, it's not a job for the faint of heart. And I think to combine this last two questions, when you think about something that really does take 5 years to do, you know, you've got to buy the land, you've got to get it zoned, you've got to meet your pre-sale requirement. That all takes a couple, 3 years. And then you got to build it, which takes another couple, 3 years. And, you know, that's one of the problems with the tall building. Tall buildings take a long time to build. It's not like you slam together, you know, a 10-story building and get it done in 8 months. This is a 3-year project. So you've committed 5 or 6 years of your life and your resources to do something. And as you said, in the volatility of the world theater, a lot happens in 5 or 6 years.
Well, and certainly the world is much more connected and plugged in place since the Pele building, because that was the late 80s, early 1990s, and it makes me wonder sometimes if anything like that will ever get built again, just because it takes so long to produce and because so many little bumps seem to come along the way.
Yeah. I think another thing to think about is what your assumptions are about the future. It's not only what's going on today, but, you know, I think if you would look at a lot of those budgets, and people were presuming significant increases in value. So, you know, maybe at the time, and stay with condominiums for a minute, the existing market was $350 a square foot, but they were saying, I won't be done for 3 more years, it'll be $450 a square foot. Well, we not only have not had any growth, we've had contraction. So, you know, when you look at a couple of those buildings you mentioned, there's no doubt in my mind that those buildings were being built with those developers thinking about Chicago being a different place, you know, than it actually is. You know, we are the heart of the Midwest, and you know, we're not $1,000 a square foot town. We're a $600 a square foot town. And the minute you think we're $1,000 a square foot town, or the minute you think we're going to become $1,000 a square foot town, you know, I worry about that.
Sitting where you sit and looking at projects going up in China, in Dubai, really has to make you think sometimes if the economic rules are just completely different over there, and I imagine to a certain extent they are, but they still have banks in China and they still have banks in Dubai. And I look at developments like Shanghai and kind of think that they've got 1 billion people there, and they certainly have people who are going to move into these places in the next 100 years. But then you look at Dubai and just the massive things that are going on there and that are still being planned, largely because they can and they've got the cash to pay for it. But do you wonder sometimes who's going to live in these places and what are these places for?
Absolutely. But I have to worry about what's going on Michigan Avenue in
Right.
Chicago. But, you know, to go to that, I wish the Spire would get built. I mean, I absolutely think that that's, you know, dramatic architecture, would be wonderful for the city of Chicago. There is no doubt that tall buildings add a cachet, you know, bring notoriety to the city. I really hope it gets built. Now, you know, I might sit here and say I'm not sure how it ever will, but that doesn't change my opinion that I wish they would have pulled it off. I mean, I wish that building were there. It would be good for everybody. You know, it's kind of the old theory that a rising tide raises all ships. And if we could have gotten a building like that in Chicago, what it would have done for our city and our condominium market in downtown Chicago would have been fabulous. So I'm a big fan. I want them to get it done.
Does it help their situation at all, short of opening your wallet and giving them money, that there are people like you out there who want this to succeed?
Yeah, yeah, but I can't do anything about, the fact that they were going to charge, whatever they were going to charge. I mean, $1,000 a foot, $1,200 a foot for their condominiums, and I just sat there and said, hope you get it, hope you get it, guys. It'd be good for all of us. But, short of that, right now there's a big hole in the ground.
Well, I want to thank you for coming out here. Richard Hanson with Mesa Development in Chicago, and it's one thing to plan something and it's another to pay for it, and we wish we could pay for a lot of this stuff.
Right.
I know. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming.
Thank you very much.